The scan had been running for 11 seconds when Counselor Vedrath turned to look at Queen Isavane and said nothing. He did not need to. The readout was speaking for both of them. Isavane kept her eyes on the glass panel and kept her hands clasped behind her back and kept her breathing measured, because the girl on the other side of the partition was watching her through the observation window with the look of someone who expected to be told she had failed a routine physical. She had not failed anything. She had, in fact, just lit every dormant sequence on the Cathara lineage matrix in a way that had not happened in 114 years. "Don't," Isavane said quietly, before Vedrath could speak. He closed his mouth. The girl's name was Marin Calloway. 18 years old, human, a third-year student at the Arith Institute's orbital campus. She had enrolled in xenobiology on a partial academic grant, and she had come to the Hegemony's medical suite today for a standard species compatibility assessment, the kind every non-Ven student on campus completed before the semester lab rotations. The assessment took 12 minutes. It involved a passive genetic scan, a cardiac mapping, and a visual acuity test. Most students finished it in 10. Marin Calloway had triggered the lineage matrix at the 40-second mark. Isavane had been in the observation room because she was here for something else entirely, a trade mediation that had run 3 hours over schedule in the chamber below, and she had stopped in the corridor when the alert tone reached her through the closed door. A tone she had never heard in her adult life but had been trained to recognize since childhood. She had told her escort to wait. She had opened the door. That had been 4 minutes ago. She had not moved since. The girl was average height, brown-haired, brown-eyed in the way humans often were, unremarkable by any standard the Ven court would apply. She sat on the scan platform in a gray student tunic with a worn strap on one shoulder bag, and she was frowning at the readout display on her side of the partition, with the expression of someone who suspected the equipment had malfunctioned. She reached out and tapped the display panel once, experimentally. The matrix pulsed brighter. Isavane exhaled through her nose. Vedrath leaned close enough to speak without carrying. "Your Majesty, if this holds at full sequence completion, I know what it means. The Conclave has been waiting. I know what the Conclave has been waiting for." She looked at him. "You will say nothing to anyone until I have spoken to her. Not a word, not a signal, not an expression on your face in the corridor. Do you understand me?" He pressed one hand to his chest in the old acknowledgement and stepped back. On the other side of the glass, Marin Calloway had given up on the display panel and was now looking directly at Isavane through the observation window. Not with recognition. She had no way of recognizing a Ven queen from a medical administrator, but with the particular alertness of a student who had noticed that the people watching her had stopped talking. Isavane walked to the door. She had been queen for 22 years. She had presided over the Ven conclave through a border war, a succession crisis, and the slow hemorrhage of the old bloodline that had begun 2 generations before her coronation, and had left her, at 53, the last of her line with no heir confirmed and no prospect of one that the conclave's genetic laws would recognize. The lineage matrix required blood resonance. You either had it or you did not. Artificial replication had been tried twice in history, and had failed both times in ways the archives described with careful diplomatic language that did not quite conceal the grief underneath. She opened the examination room door and stepped inside. Marin stood up automatically, the instinct of someone raised in institutional settings where adults entering a room meant you stood. Then she registered that Isavane was not wearing medical whites and visibly recalibrated. "I'm sorry," the girl said. Am I in the wrong room? I was told this was the compatibility scan." "It is," Isavane said. "You're in the right room. Sit down, please." Marin sat. Her hands went to the strap of her bag, found it, held it, the small anchoring gesture of someone trying not to look uncertain. Isavane pulled the technician's stool from the corner and sat facing her at even height. She had learned decades ago that standing above someone you needed to reach was the fastest way to close the distance before you had opened it. "The scan found something," she said. "I figured." Marin looked at the display. "Is it bad?" "No." A pause. "It's complicated." "How complicated?" Isavane considered the girl for a moment. The directness was there, that was a lineage trait, though it expressed differently across species. The steadiness under uncertainty. The willingness to ask the blunt question rather than wait for someone else to name the shape of the thing. "There is a genetic marker in your sequence," she said. "That belongs to a bloodline I know very well. It has been absent from every scan run in this system for over a century. You carry it in a form that is not trace ancestry. You carry it in a form that is active." Marin's brow drew together. "Active meaning what?" "Meaning the Cathara resonance matrix recognized it as viable succession lineage." Isavane kept her voice even. "Your maternal line. How much do you know about your maternal grandmother's family?" "Almost nothing." The answer came quickly, which meant it was a sore place. "She came to the human colonies from somewhere else. My mother said she never talked about before. She died when my mother was 4. There were no records." There were records. Isavane knew where they were. She had spent 6 years looking for the end of this particular thread, because the thread did not end, it went somewhere, and someone had taken considerable trouble to ensure that the somewhere was unreachable. Unreachable, it turned out, until a third-year xenobiology student sat down for a standard compatibility scan on a Tuesday afternoon and lit the matrix like a returning signal. "Your grandmother," Isavane said carefully, "left the Venn hegemony when she was approximately 30 years old. She left under circumstances that were not her choice. There was a faction within the conclave. It no longer exists. It was dismantled 20 years ago, that believed the branch bloodlines were a political liability and moved to remove them from the succession picture. Removal was not a gentle process. Your grandmother was young and perceptive enough to understand what was coming, and she ran before it arrived. She went further than they expected. She went further than any of us knew to look." Marin had gone very still. "She was the youngest daughter of the Cathara third house," Isavane continued. "A branch line, not first in succession, not even third. But legitimate bloodline, fully resonant, the kind the matrix reads as viable." "You're saying I'm saying your grandmother was Venn." The word landed and sat there. Marin did not speak for a long moment. Her fingers had tightened on the bag strap until her knuckles showed light. "That's not possible," she said finally. "I would know, someone would have, there would have been something." "Your grandmother was very thorough." Isavane said it without judgment. "She had good reasons to be. The circumstances under which she left were not safe ones, and the people who created those circumstances were not people whose reach she could afford to underestimate. She protected her family the best way she knew how, which was to erase herself from every record that the people hunting her might find. Which was to erase herself." "Yes." Marin looked at the display where the matrix was still running its quiet confirmation. Then she looked at Isavane. "Who are you?" "My name is Isavane. I am the queen of the Venn conclave." The silence that followed was of a different quality than the ones before it. It had weight and direction. Marin's expression moved through several things in quick succession: disbelief, the instinct to dismiss it, and then the slower arrival of the understanding that the woman sitting on a technician's stool across from her had not offered a title as a joke. "You came here for a trade mediation," Marin said slowly. "I did." "And you walked into this room because a tone I have been trained since childhood to recognize sounded through a closed door, and I made a choice." Isavane held her gaze. "I am glad I did." The door to the observation room opened. Vedrath stepped through it. his face carefully composed in the way that meant something had happened outside that Isavane was not going to like. Your Majesty, the senior attaché from the Trade Council is asking whether you require. Tell him I require 10 more minutes. She did not look away from Marin. And tell him that if anyone other than my personal escort enters this corridor in the next quarter hour, I will be reconsidering the terms of the Eastern Shipping Accord personally, with a stylus, in his presence. A brief pause. Yes, Your Majesty. The door closed. Marin was watching her with an expression that had shifted from disbelief to something more careful. They want to know what's in this room. The Conclave has been hoping for a confirmed bloodline for a long time. Word of a matrix activation travels quickly through certain channels. Isavane kept her voice even. What I told Vedrath stands. Nothing happens to you today because of what that display shows. The people in those channels do not get to decide what this moment means. Only you do. But there will be more pressure later. Yes, there will be. She did not soften it. I could tell you otherwise, but that would be a poor foundation for whatever comes next. There will be people in the Conclave who will look at you and see an answer to a political problem. I am telling you now, clearly and without condition, I am not one of them. What you are is more than a solution to anything. Marin sat with that for a moment. Then, what does it actually mean to carry this, the resonance? What does it do? Nothing on its own. It is not a power. It is not a burden you feel. It is more like a key that fits a lock. Whether you ever turn it is your decision. Isavane paused. But the things that come with it, if you choose to understand them, the history, the people, the shape of what your grandmother left behind when she ran, those are real. And they are yours whether you claim them or not. I still don't. Marin started again. What do you want from me, actually? Isavane had thought about this for the 4 minutes she had spent standing in the observation room. She had thought about what a queen was supposed to say, and what a queen was supposed to offer, and what the Conclave's law required, and what the Conclave's law assumed. She had thought about the girl on the other side of the glass, and the grandmother who had run so far and so carefully that her grandchild was sitting in the middle of an alien medical suite without the faintest idea what she carried. I want you to come with me to the hegemony, she said. Not as a subject, not as a ward, as someone who deserves to understand what she carries and where it comes from. I want to show you the archives your grandmother's family left. I want you to stand in rooms she would have stood in and know what she protected you from and why it mattered. The rest, every question about succession, about the Conclave, about what any of it means for your life, can wait until you have that ground under your feet. She paused. I am not asking you to become anything today. I am asking if you are willing to know. The girl sat very still for one more moment. Then she reached down, picked up the bag strap, and slung the bag over her shoulder, the motion of someone who had made a decision and was orienting herself toward it. Can I ask you something first? Marin said. Yes. My grandmother, was she afraid when she left? Do the records say? Isavane considered the question. The archives had fragments, a departure log, a financial transfer, 2 coded messages that had taken the intelligence office 3 years to partially decrypt. They were not the portrait of a woman at peace. I think she was very frightened, she said honestly, and I think she chose to be frightened in a direction rather than frightened in place. She moved. She kept moving. She built something out of nothing at the edge of a system where no one knew her name, and she raised a daughter who enrolled in xenobiology on a partial academic grant and sat down for a routine scan and did not flinch when the readout turned strange. She held Marin's gaze. Whatever she was afraid of, she carried it well. Marin's exhale was quiet and long, and it held something that had been kept a long time. Okay, she said, show me. Isavane walked to the door and held it open. Behind them, the matrix display was still running its quiet confirmation, each sequence line returning the same answer it had been returning for the last 12 minutes. It did not need anyone's permission. It had known from the moment the scan began. But it had waited, the way all true things waited for the person at the center of it to be ready. Marin Calloway walked through the door, and Queen Isavane of the Ven Conclave walked beside her. And in the corridor, Vedrath stepped back and bowed low without a word. And the senior attaché from the Trade Council saw the Queen's expression and quietly found somewhere else to be. There was nothing more the display needed to say. It had already said everything. The rest belonged to the girl who had finally been found, and the long road of becoming that was just now beginning to open in front of her.